And that's one of the things about religion that we have to remember when we're talking about that makes it such a hot topic issue is because we're talking about law. Who gets to be God? Who gets to be God's deputies? Who is the Most High? Who is the divine authority? It's all about the claim to the Most High. The only way that somebody can be higher than us is if we give away our power. Because there's nobody, we're all equal. But we're not equal in our knowledge, so ultimately I think it does have to be a hierarchy, but it has to be a cooperative hierarchy like a bee colony. It's about what our value system is, what we care about.
Hello, Hive Mind. Today is September 22nd, 2020. I am your host, Nate Cap. Welcome to the 18th Cubbywhole Podcast, where important topics are unveiled, discussed, and tested. Our website is cubbywhole.com. That's cubbywhole.com. Before we start today, I'd like to say that I understand a lot of these topics shared on this podcast can be very heavy and seem overwhelming. And that's, really understandable. But if we go into them with an open and serious mind without thinking we know it all, then I truly believe we will benefit way, way more. We'll have room to grow, to understand, rather than just be the person who always says, well, I don't know, and that just sounds like a conspiracy, or the person who always plays devil's advocate and doesn't actually consider what's being said. So, someone who just wants to argue. These topics aren't for arguments as much as they are for exercising and entertaining the ideas from them, to be able to see if there's truth or benefit to looking deeper within them, which I'd argue there is 100%, because it's about growth. And I'd also argue that there should be skepticism as long as it's healthy and honest. Keyword, honest. These topics aren't meant to be believed. They're meant to be observed. They're meant to be learned from. It's about knowledge and higher learning. It's about being the willing student of life. On the last show, we covered the basic overview of mind control and how the masses are swayed into pushing agendas into fruition for the egoic sorcerers of this world. We got into sorcery and magic and the art of science of how and how they operate. Sorcery being the egoic black magic that is for the sole purpose of one's own gain, which is lowercase will, through mind control. And then magic, which is about building and bringing light, the process of influencing change in accordance with the higher self will, the uppercase will. We covered the methods used by sorcerers to get what they want and how they get their agendas accomplished by feasting on our ignorance, our lack of critical knowledge, and our obedience. All this done through manipulation and control of media sources, through things like the television, through magazine articles, through fact-check articles, through movies, late-night comedy, history, and definitely much, much more. Also, I broke down what a conspiracy or what conspirators truly means, which is any group of people working together towards a common goal, whether that goal be evil or chaotic, or for good and exposing evil. Today, we're going to go further into mind control and observe the mass control structure system, the control system that essentially is an occult pyramid that runs our world, run by sorcerers through mind control. And again, for those that don't know, occult simply means hidden, hidden from sight. So this control structure is comprised of two parts. One of those parts being hierarchy, which means organized rulership. And this consists of generals or authority types that are ranked one above the other according to status or degree. So then, the other part is how this control system is structured. And this is called compartmentalization, meaning how the control systems are compartmentalized. And these control systems are broken down into many different sections or compartments that are essentially separate from each other and do not understand what the other compartments are actually doing. This is called compartmentalization. This is a good way to keep people advancing an agenda that they might not have all the information regarding, Therefore, since they don't see the total picture, they keep going with the work that is actually being orchestrated from a much higher level of awareness or knowledge that they do not have. So the higher up in the hierarchical structure, the more knowledge of how the structure operates. This is about the dark occult having a power differential through knowledge over all who operate beneath them. And the lower down the control structure you go, the less knowledge is known about the control structure. So it's a top-down hierarchical structure. It's like how in the military you'll have individuals in the lower rank or structure who are working on one project that's part of a bigger project that is being operated on by other commanders or other types of military. And both of these groups of people don't know each other, and they're working on the same project and don't even know what it is or what it's being used for. This is compartmentalization of a control structure. They are walled off from each other. This is likened to a pyramid structure. When you think of the top, that would be the apex, which is usually known for being the few or the elite. And those few are the ones with complete or total knowledge and awareness of that whole pyramidal structure. Or they know how it operates from the middle out and the top down and the bottom up. These few understand the agendas inside and out. They pull the strings from the top. They know the goals of the agendas. They know the whole complex and overarching agenda. So if you think about each level in the pyramid scheme, think about how each level has a commander lower or higher than the other. Also, it's about knowing there is the highest in command or who's higher in the hierarchical structure than all the rest of the commanders. But all of these control structures are about keeping commanders in line to hold in lockstep or alliance to carry out the agenda because they answer to their superiors to the next higher level of this hierarchical structure or system. And usually the lower level commanders, who many of whom may be well-intentioned, who more than likely don't understand anything about any agendas from the top of the control structure, that is. These commanders just want their paycheck, and most have the mentality of, I just want to go along to get along. And I don't want no trouble. I just want to make my money, pay my bills, and be on my way. And who cares what I'm a part of? I have it good. Why should I stop? And many of these well-intentioned individuals really have no idea what's really going on because of the nature of being compartmentalized in a hierarchical control structure. And at the deeper core, they don't understand how they are being used and how they basically are just disposable toys at the end of the day when the sorcerers are done playing with them. Because that's how much these dark occult sorcerers really care about those who they see as being beneath them. They don't really care. They don't really care about anybody but themselves and their agendas. And this is the control system. This system of manipulation is a pyramidal structure of control through media, political structures, through organized and institutionalized religions, also the military-industrial complex, entertainment, public and private education systems, major corporations, and so much more. These control structures are run by dominators, so the people who reside at the apex of the dark pyramid structures. This is the result of not only social Darwinism, which is the belief that one or a few has the right to rule over others because they are the most ruthless, or it's the idea or belief of the people that they should be ruled or controlled by the most ruthless, aka dominators. And if you haven't listened to podcast 10, social Darwinism was broke down along with many of the other worldview schisms that keep us enslaved to these dominators. So, the two qualities that these control systems have that are built into them are hierarchy and compartmentalization. The higher up the pyramid structure, the fewer people there are, and the more knowledge of the whole agenda there is. And the compartmentalization is the walled off sections and layers of control where basically one side is divided from the other and each side has no idea about the other. When we do some deep studying on the dark occultists of this world, we can see how they hide agendas in plain sight, right out in the open. So these beings, these types of people, stay visible in a setting that masks their presence while they dominate with their higher knowledge. Basically, they place their agendas right in the public eye, which goes unnoticed as a result of not having higher knowledge of self and not being able to notice the agendas being waged on them. Sidney Webb, the founder of the Fabian Society, said, to play those millions of minds, to watch them slowly respond to unseen stimulus, to guide their aspirations without their knowledge, all this, whether in high capacities or in humble, is a big and endless game of chess, of ever extraordinary excitement. And again, that was said by Sidney Webb, the founder of the Fabian Society. And for those who don't know the Fabian Society, it was founded as a socialist society think tank. Basically, it was the dark occult heavily influencing politics. And I'm pretty sure they're still influencing and playing with our minds in some other way or another. But probably more advanced now too. If you check out the Fabian Society logo, you can see right in their coat of arms, the heraldry, it's an illustration of a wolf with sheep's clothing. Just let that sink in. So you should go look that up. Look up the Fabian Society and look at their logo. And definitely do some research on the Fabian Society so you understand how they influence the minds of the masses. Because it's mind control. Do we or you really want to be played or ruled by others? I don't. And I'm assuming you who's listening doesn't want that as well. So it's about understanding how agendas are hidden in plain sight. It's also well known that hiding agendas in plain sight is a favored methodology by the dark occult. They are definitely masters of the methods of hiding things in plain view or plain sight. These sorcerers are likened to magicians or mentalists who enjoy doing mind tricks on people right in their faces, especially because their level of awareness or consciousness of those tricks isn't to a degree of knowing or understanding what's really going on. And it's about mockery. It's about mockery done unto the uninitiated. So, those that aren't conscious, or basically, it's done to those who are ignorant to occulted symbols, methodologies, esoteric language, and basically the way they being the dark occult sorcerers, it's how they operate. They mock the clueless. Those that are clueless to what's hidden right in front of them, having no idea about what control structures actually are or how they operate. When we understand the behavior of the R complex, the reptile brain, the lower part of the brain, we understand that these dark occultists are operating out of base consciousness, low consciousness. This part of the brain deals with fight or flight response, base instincts, and survival mode. So these hierarchy control systems are based in lower consciousness, fear-based consciousness. And fear leads to what? It leads to control. It's about mind control and control through violation of others. People have to be kept in the dark for agendas to work because their blind participation is what's needed for them, for the agendas to succeed. And this is really pretty saddening because most human beings are completely in the dark and participating in so many agendas. They have no idea. And I don't want to get ahead of myself by saying this, but by agendas, I don't just mean agendas as solely plans or motives. I'm also talking about psyops and rituals on scales unimaginable. But like I said, I don't want to get ahead of myself. That will be for future shows. The point is that these shows are all about trying to help those who want to not only know about what's really going on, but just how knowing this information and sharing it is what expands consciousness and love. Because when we become knowledgeable about these methodologies and agendas, then we become spiritually prepared to shield ourselves from them and take back our freedom and authority of self. We know how to say no. It's about withdrawing our participation from these agendas while envisioning what true freedom is and looks like. A really great quote that really resonates with me about the control of knowledge, because nobody ultimately has the right to occult or withhold critical knowledge, especially knowledge that helps reduce suffering in this world. Here's a quote by the astounding researcher Mark Passio. He says, "The only way that you can ensure truly that knowledge that may be, if used in the wrong way, dangerous and could be used in irresponsible ways, the only way that you could ensure that knowledge from not falling into the wrong hands is to propagate it as widely and as freely as possible." And again, this was said by Mark Passio, who is one of the greatest de-occultists, who walks the walk by sharing this type of beneficial knowledge widely and freely as possible. He's doing exactly what I just quoted him as saying. And that's exactly what we are doing here on Cubbywhole. Knowledge isn't owned by anyone, and no one has the right to withhold or occult knowledge. Withholding knowledge is what generates suffering, especially if that knowledge is beneficial to the growth of consciousness, to the growth of the species, which is us. And the knowledge that these sorcerers hold from us actually is. It is beneficial. They know the knowledge that empowers people, and the knowledge of natural law is a big part of what they don't want us to know. They know because they know how to bend the laws of nature to their own gain, their own benefit, at the expense of others' suffering. They know that if the public actually knew and understood these hidden types of knowledge, then they wouldn't be able to maintain control the way that they do or at all. This is why so much critical knowledge is compartmentalized. The structure of any institution that is going to use any knowledge dangerously or irresponsibly would be that of a sorcerer. Well, why is that? Because sorcerers, the dark occultists, they are holding that knowledge to maintain control, a power differential over the people. If the knowledge were spread widely and freely, there wouldn't be a knowledge differential. There wouldn't be a hierarchical control structure of authority, because then the playing field would be leveled with knowledge being out in the open. And one way to share this type of information decentralized and autonomously would be through BitTorrent, which is about one person gaining data and then making it available to share with others. So with BitTorrent, everyone becomes a receiver and a transmitter of that data, that information. This is how information does not fall into the wrong hands or does not become prevented from being propagated and understood by everyone. This is how we prevent knowledge and information from getting into the wrong hands. It's all about the BitTorrent effect. This is why we need to understand programs like this so that we can effectively share information with each other, to keep it out of the wrong hands, to help shield us from mind control. It's about taking in many sources of critical information and then distributing or sharing that information widely and freely. This is the model of BitTorrent, meaning decentralized, so not centralized, because it is information that does not belong to anyone, including those who claim to be the authority. This works in the opposite of compartmentalization because sharing information with all has nothing to do with walling the information off from other people. And something I've said and will keep saying is that the information I share does not and never will belong solely to me. This information belongs to all people. So the sorcerers of this world operate through occult principles, which is hidden knowledge. And the way that it's used is hierarchically structured and compartmentalized. So, what's happening in these control structures as a result of this knowledge being sequestered or hidden or compartmentalized? These control structures really reveal what's truly going on if we look at them logically. A pyramid scheme of control is all about taking orders from the top and giving orders to those below. So if we are being honest with ourselves, what is this really saying about our condition in this control system? Well, in order to take orders, there first has to be an order giver. And what is an order giver? A master. Now, what does that make the order follower? A slave. I mean, yeah, an order taker or order follower might be giving orders to the slaves below them as well, but it doesn't negate the fact that the order follower is a slave. So what is the opposite of being a slave? Being free, right? Freedom. Yet just about all these order givers or order followers think they are free. You can't be free if you have a master. No matter how many order followers or slaves you have beneath you, you cannot be free. Freedom doesn't work that way. Hierarchy order givers may grant their order followers with more rights, quote unquote rights over those beneath him or her, but they still have masters at the end of the day. Masters that they have to obey in order to maintain a position that they believe brings them freedom. You see, if we are really being honest with ourselves, we'll see the illusion. We'll see the control structure for what it really is. And that is a disease. It's a disease of the mind. It's a disease of the heart. And it's a disease of the soul. When in a state of confusion and fear, when one is in this condition, in a control system, they can become violent and take their aggression out on those below them, which sadly, many people believe they have the right to do so because of the status granted to them from the hierarchy. No, they do not. They do not have the natural law right to violate anyone or any sentient being, no matter how much we or they believe they have the right to do so. This is why we have to deeply understand natural law. We won't allow these control systems to have their way with us once we do. Once we know what natural law is. Once we know how it operates. Once we know how to apply it into our lives. And when we have our thoughts, emotions, and actions aligned with natural law, I believe we won't let these control systems have their violent ways with us any longer. The goal is to break out of their mind control. Their control, period. These structures don't actually exist in nature, and that's what really needs to be known. They're not aligned with natural law. They're just faulty man-made fantasies, just completely made up concepts built within the diseased human mind. A mind full of confusion and fear internally. And when a mind is in these states, it's not functioning at a higher level. It's not operating from the neocortex of the brain where higher learning and higher thinking takes place, where there's actual order. And it's not aware of what's happening within the self and around the self in which the self operates. It's not conscious. The mind is not conscious. And like I've said before, if we are operating in fear and confusion, then we are operating out of the R complex, the lower reptile part of the brain. And staying in fear and confusion keeps us in survival mode where we don't think, where we're just in fight or flight, completely right where we are wanted for these control structures to function. And see, just becoming conscious of this information is the start of having the power to tear down these control structures in the mind, because that's where they are. That's where they're planted and conditioned. And this is why me and a few others are doing this. And when I say a few, that really, destroys me to feel like there's only a few out there, especially that I know of. I don't want to live another man's conceptualized fantasy, and I'm doing my best to tear it down, one piece of knowledge at a time. Critical knowledge, important knowledge of self. And of course, a major part of that goal is to help others, to help others realize these structures so they can realize their true self and help, take it down as well. Here's a quote by Phil Rockstro. He says, "The authoritarianism inherent to this structure is antithetical to the concept of the rights and liberties of the individual. Most individuals bound by secrecy-prone hierarchical values will over time lose the ability to display free thinking, engage in civic discourse, and even be able to envisage the notion of freedom. And that's such a powerful and painful quote, especially because we seem to be beyond this point right now, you know? This is why if we don't know our inherent rights, then we won't know how to say no to evil. And we'll never experience any type of true freedom while we're in this physical form. Another quote I want to read. I'm going to read a couple more quotes. Our system is concentrated in the hands of a few men. We have come to be one of the worst ruled, one of the most completely controlled and dominated governments in the world. No longer a government of free opinion, no longer a government by conviction and vote of the majority, but a government by the opinion and duress of small groups of dominant men. And this was said by the 28th U.S. President, Woodrow Wilson. So the next quote is, "The conscious and intelligent manipulation of the organized habits and opinions of the masses is an important element in democratic society. Those who manipulate this unseen mechanism of society constitute an invisible government, which is the true ruling power of our country." And this quote is by Edward Bernays, who was an Austrian-American known for psychological warfare and propaganda through public relations. Now just think about that. And I definitely recommend looking into his background to better understand many of the ways of manipulation, as he stated. And it's important to understand the usage of propaganda, in case some people don't. You know, it's something that mass mind control can't operate without. So propaganda is the communication or expression of opinions or actions carried out deliberately by individuals or groups with a plan to influence the opinions or actions of other individuals or groups for predetermined outcomes. Plus, it's also done through psychological manipulations. It's about influencing an audience in order to further an agenda by presenting what appears to be facts in order to encourage a specific synthesis or participation, or, using loaded language, so a certain type of rhetoric with buzzwords in order to produce an emotional response rather than a rational one, especially to the information being presented. What prevents us from realizing the control structure and understanding the hidden knowledge that it works through is mind control. See, we've been conditioned to not care, to not love, to hate, to not think. And this is all due to being separate in the mind. It's a conditioned illusion of being separate. Separate from nature, separate from source, separate from love. And this is why We have to condition ourselves and help others back to connecting with love and source and nature. That's freedom. It's freedom from suffering. And as long as we allow our minds to be smothered in layers and layers of separatism, being compartmentalized or divided from source, then we fall deeper and deeper into bondage and slavery, completely disconnected, turned off and operating from the minds of the control structure, aka the dominators. A really great allegory for this is the story about the ancient Egyptian mythos of the god Osiris, where he was chopped up and dismembered into 14 pieces by his brother Set, and then scattered throughout Egypt. And this represents being separated from source or from nature or from higher self, the higher self. Ultimately, it's about the self being disassembled or dismembered, and the goal is to search for those pieces and remember who we truly are, because we've been dismembered. Dismembered from source. We've been divided or separated through strategic conditioning. And this is why there's lots of suffering and why we are so upset. Because Osiris's brother, Set, is the Setian, the Satan, or separation principle. And we will definitely get more into that as we go on. But it's just really important to understand how mind control works. Through compartmentalization and through the control structure in which the hierarchy and compartmentalization reside. And we have to realize this is all just an illusion. And we have to wake up to that and reconnect to nature. Because if we don't, we'll never get to experience freedom. Okay, guys. I think that's all we have for you today. So thank you for tuning in and listening. And if you want, you can find more of our work here at Cubbywhole.com. That's Cubbywhole.com. There you'll find news updates, videos, and much more. We hope you found value here today, and please tune in to the next show where we go further into mind control and how these methods of mind control are used on our minds and our lives. It is really important to watch these shows in order and not to miss any show, so that way you get the full progression and have a better understanding of where it all leads to. It's important to remember it's up to each one of us to educate and free ourselves and help others free themselves from all the rulers of this world, all the control freaks of this world. So thank you all for listening and have a great day.